The morning my harvest trucks were supposed to roll out, they couldn't move an inch. My farm entrance was blocked by a massive steel gate, and the HOA president standing beside it had one sentence for me. "Your farm no longer has access." She thought she had just stopped a few trucks. She didn't realize she'd just put the HOA's own secret records in motion, and by harvest season, those records were going to expose everything. If you love dramatic HOA stories, HOA Karen revenge, property battles, and satisfying justice, subscribe now, because this farm fight is only getting started. The first truck arrived at 5:18 in the morning. The driver expected to pull through the main farm entrance, load the harvested produce, and leave before the summer heat became unbearable. Instead, he called me. "There's a gate across your road." I thought he meant the normal entrance gate. Then he sent me a photograph. My stomach dropped. A brand new steel barrier stretched across the entrance to my farm. It wasn't there the night before. I drove down immediately. The harvest crew was waiting behind 3 loaded trucks, and standing beside the gate was Linda Parker, the HOA president. She held a clipboard like she was inspecting a property she owned. I stepped out of my truck. "What is this?" Linda barely looked at me. "Enforcement action." "Against who?" "Against this property." I stared at the gate. "This is my farm." She smiled. "Your farm is inside the HOA-controlled community." That sentence made my blood boil. The property had been in my family for decades. We grew corn, tomatoes, peppers, and hay there. Our farm entrance connected directly to the county road, and every harvest season, dozens of trucks used that entrance. Linda knew that. That's why the timing wasn't an accident. Harvest was beginning. If the entrance stayed blocked, my crops couldn't leave. I pointed toward the trucks. "You need to move this gate." "No." "Then show me the order authorizing it." She opened her clipboard. "We issued an access restriction." "An HOA restriction?" "Correct." "From a judge?" She hesitated. "No." "From the county?" "No." "Then who authorized it?" Linda looked directly at me. "The board." I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You think an HOA board can close a private farm entrance?" Linda's expression hardened. "We can enforce our community standards. You're not enforcing a parking rule." I pointed at the gate. "You're blocking a working farm." She shrugged. "Then perhaps you should have followed the rules." Behind me, one of the truck drivers whispered, "This is going to get expensive." He had no idea how right he was. Because that morning, Linda believed the gate was the end of my harvest. By the end of the season, it would become the evidence that exposed the entire HOA. The gate stayed locked, and every hour it remained there, my harvest became more valuable and more vulnerable. By noon, the first crop buyer called. "Your shipment hasn't arrived." "I know." "What's happening?" I looked toward the steel barrier. An HOA blocked the farm entrance. There was a long silence. Then he said something that made the situation even worse. "If the produce doesn't arrive by tomorrow morning, the contract penalty starts." That was the moment I realized Linda hadn't just blocked a driveway. She had put my entire harvest schedule at risk. I called the county road department. They sent an inspector. He walked the entrance, examined the gate, checked the property maps, and pulled out his tablet. After several minutes, he looked at me. "Who installed this?" "The HOA." He frowned. "Do they have a permit?" "I don't know." He photographed the gate. Then he photographed the road. Then he asked for my property deed. I handed him a copy. He studied it carefully. The access road appears to connect directly to a recorded agricultural easement. I felt a spark of hope. So they can't block it. I didn't say that yet. He pointed toward the gate, but if this easement is valid, they may have a serious problem. That afternoon, I called an attorney. Daniel Brooks arrived before sunset. He walked the entire entrance without saying much. Then he crouched beside the gate. The posts were freshly installed. The concrete was still pale. He touched one of them. Fresh. Very. When did you last use this entrance? Yesterday. And when did they install this? Probably overnight. Daniel stood up. That's important. Why? Because an emergency restriction usually requires documentation. He pointed toward the gate. This looks like someone acted first and planned to justify it afterward. That sentence stayed with me. We requested the HOA's enforcement records. Linda responded, within an hour. The HOA claimed the entrance violated a community access policy. Daniel read the policy, then laughed. They've made a mistake. What kind? The policy applies to common area access. He pointed toward my property map. This entrance isn't common property. It's part of your agricultural access easement. That should have ended the argument. It didn't. Linda doubled down. The next morning, she sent a second notice. The gate would remain in place until I complied with the HOA's farm use restrictions. But there was no farm use restriction in the governing documents. Daniel immediately requested the board meeting minutes, where the restriction had supposedly been approved. The HOA refused. They claimed the records were confidential. That made Daniel suspicious. Why would routine enforcement records be confidential? I don't know. Exactly. Then a county inspector called me. He had reviewed the aerial property maps. His voice was serious. There's something you need to know. What? The gate isn't just blocking your farm entrance. He paused. It may also be blocking an emergency access route. I looked toward the locked entrance, and suddenly the situation became much bigger than my harvest. Because if the HOA had blocked an officially recorded emergency and agricultural access route, they hadn't just created a farm dispute. They may have violated county regulations, and someone at the HOA already knew it. The county inspector's warning changed everything. If that road was legally protected, Linda hadn't blocked a driveway. She had potentially blocked an access route the county expected to remain open. Daniel immediately requested the original property survey. We found it in the county records. There it was, a clearly marked agricultural access easement running from my farm entrance to the county road. The easement was decades old. It existed before the current HOA was even created. Daniel pointed at the document. They can't simply erase this with an HOA notice. So why did they build the gate? That's the question. And then we found the answer hiding in the HOA's development records. The HOA had recently submitted plans for a new neighborhood expansion. The proposed construction would add dozens of homes. But there was a problem. The expansion required changes to the surrounding road network. And my farm entrance sat directly beside the proposed development area. Daniel spread the plans across the table. Look here. I leaned closer. The HOA's proposed access road crossed the same area covered by my agricultural easement. They wanted to reroute traffic, but my existing access rights complicated their plans. My farm entrance wasn't supposed to disappear. It was supposed to be replaced, and someone needed me to agree. I shook my head. They never asked me. Daniel nodded. Exactly. Instead, the HOA had blocked the entrance. Then they created a reason for doing it. The supposed violations were mostly minor. A trailer parked near the barn, a temporary equipment shed, a section of fencing that allegedly didn't meet community standards. None of them justified permanently blocking a farm entrance. But Linda had something else. She claimed the HOA had received complaints from nearby residents about farm traffic. Daniel requested those complaints. Only 3 existed. 2 were unsigned. The third came from an address that didn't exist. We checked it twice. There was no house there, no mailbox, no resident, no property record matching the complaint. Daniel stared at the document. Someone fabricated this. That was the first time I felt genuinely angry. They weren't simply enforcing rules. They were building a paper trail. A fake one. Then the county inspector called again. The gate has been reported. By who? I can't disclose that yet. What's happening? The county is sending an investigator. The next morning, 2 county vehicles arrived at the farm. The investigators photographed the gate, measured the roadway, checked the survey markers. Then they examined the concrete foundations holding the barrier in place. One investigator turned toward me. Do you have security footage from the night this was installed? I have cameras around the barn. Good. I pulled up the recordings. At 1:47 a.m., headlights appeared at the entrance. A pickup truck stopped. Then another. Workers stepped out. Within minutes, they began installing the gate. But the most important vehicle arrived last, a black SUV. The driver's door opened, and the person who stepped out wasn't a contractor. It was Linda. She stood beside the workers, watched them install the barrier, then pointed toward the farm entrance. The investigator leaned closer to the screen. Can you pause that? I did. He stared at the image, then quietly said, That's going into the report. But there was another detail. Linda wasn't alone. Someone was sitting in the passenger seat, and when we zoomed in, we recognized him. He was the same consultant whose company had recently been hired by the HOA for the planned development. The gate wasn't just about my harvest. It was connected to something much bigger. The man in Linda's SUV was the missing piece. His name was Mark Ellis. He was a development consultant hired by the HOA only 6 weeks earlier. And according to the county records, his company was helping design the proposed neighborhood expansion. Daniel requested the consultant's contract. The HOA fought it. That alone told us the document mattered. Eventually, the records were produced. One paragraph caught Daniel's attention. The consultant would receive an additional payment if the proposed access route was approved without private property complications. My farm was the private property complication. Daniel looked at me. They needed your entrance gone. But why block it during harvest? Because that's when they had leverage. The realization hit hard. If my crops couldn't leave the farm, I could lose contracts. If I lost enough money, the HOA could pressure me into accepting their proposed road arrangement. It wasn't just an access dispute. It was pressure disguised as enforcement. We filed an emergency complaint with the county. The county investigator reviewed the surveillance footage, property survey, HOA documents, and development plans. Then the investigator asked Linda to explain why she was present when the gate was installed. Her response was simple. I was supervising HOA property maintenance. The investigator looked at the survey. This isn't HOA property. Linda didn't answer. Did you receive written authorization from the county? No. Did you receive permission from the property owner? Linda paused. No. Then why did you authorize the installation? She looked toward her attorney. That silence said more than any answer could. Meanwhile, my harvest was getting worse. Several crops were approaching their ideal harvest window. We couldn't keep waiting, so my workers began using a narrow secondary route through the eastern field. It was slow, dangerous for heavy equipment, and completely impractical for commercial trucks. But it kept some of the harvest moving. Then something unexpected happened. A major buyer arrived at the farm. He walked the fields. He inspected the produce. Then he asked why the normal entrance was blocked. I explained everything. He looked toward the gate, then at the county vehicles. We're not canceling your contract. I was stunned. Why? Because we have the documentation. He held up the original purchase agreement. Your delivery deadline can be adjusted because the access restriction wasn't caused by you. That saved one contract, but not all of them. The financial pressure remained enormous. Then the county issued its preliminary finding. The HOA had no verified authority to block the agricultural easement. The gate had to be removed. Linda received the notice late that afternoon. She immediately called an emergency HOA meeting. But this time, the homeowners weren't listening quietly. They wanted answers. Why had the gate been installed? Why was a development consultant involved? Why had the board withheld the contract? And why had Linda personally supervised the installation? Linda tried to blame the contractor. The contractor produced his work order. Her name was on it. Then Mark Ellis was questioned. He admitted the development project would benefit if my agricultural entrance were removed. The room erupted. Linda finally lost her temper. "You don't understand what this community needs." One homeowner stood up. "No." He pointed toward the gate. "We understand exactly what you wanted." That night, the HOA board voted to remove the barrier. The next morning, the gate was dismantled. My trucks finally rolled through. The harvest moved. But as the first loaded truck left the farm, Daniel called me. "Don't celebrate yet." "Why?" "Because the county just found something else. The gate wasn't the only thing the HOA had installed without authorization. And the second discovery was about to cost them far more than the harvest. The second discovery was buried beneath the road. Literally. When the county investigators reviewed the site plans, they noticed something unusual near the farm entrance. The HOA hadn't just installed the steel gate. During the same overnight project, workers had placed underground drainage and utility lines across part of the agricultural access corridor, and they hadn't received the required authorization. The county ordered an inspection. Workers carefully exposed the buried lines. The result was worse than expected. The HOA had altered drainage patterns that redirected stormwater toward one of my fields. That meant the gate project hadn't simply blocked my entrance. It had potentially damaged the land itself. Daniel looked at the engineering report. "Now we can calculate the real damages." The agricultural specialist examined the affected fields. Some areas had already developed drainage problems. If left untreated, the damage could reduce future yields. The HOA's attempt to control one farm entrance had created a much larger liability. Then came harvest day. With the gate finally gone, trucks moved through the entrance from sunrise until sunset. Corn, tomatoes, peppers, hay. The harvest that Linda had tried to disrupt was finally moving. But something unexpected happened. The buyers began asking questions. Why had the HOA blocked a commercial farm entrance? Why had county officials become involved? Why had an HOA consultant been present during the installation? The story spread throughout the community. Homeowners started reviewing their own HOA records. They found other questionable enforcement actions, unexplained fees, contractor payments, unapproved property modifications. Within weeks, the HOA's board was facing a full independent audit. Linda resigned before the audit was completed. Mark Ellis's development contract was terminated, and the proposed expansion was suspended until the access and drainage disputes were resolved. Then the county released its final assessment. The HOA was responsible for removing the unauthorized infrastructure, restoring the drainage system, repairing the damaged access corridor, and reimbursing documented losses connected to the unlawful obstruction. The total cost was enormous. But the biggest victory wasn't the money. It was the harvest. Despite everything, the farm delivered nearly every major contract. The crops survived. The workers got paid. And the farm entrance remained legally protected. A few months later, I stood at that entrance at sunrise. The same place where Linda had once stood with her clipboard, telling me my trucks weren't allowed through. Now there was nothing blocking the road. Just open pavement leading from the county road to the fields. My father came to stand beside me. He looked at the entrance. "Funny," he said. "What?" "They thought this road was their leverage." I smiled. Instead, it became their evidence. He nodded. The lesson was simple. An HOA can create rules. It can manage legitimate common property. It can enforce lawful community standards. But it can't simply rewrite property rights because someone's plans are inconvenient. Linda thought blocking my farm entrance would force me to surrender. Instead, she created a paper trail. The gate brought investigators. The investigators uncovered the development plans. The development plans exposed the financial motive, and the financial records turned a neighborhood dispute into a full investigation. By the end, the HOA had lost its president, its consultant, its expansion project, and a huge amount of money. My farm. It kept producing. The following harvest was our strongest in years, and every time one of those trucks rolled through that entrance, I remembered the morning Linda told me, "Your farm no longer has access." She was wrong. It was never hers to take away. And that's the thing about HOA revenge. Sometimes you don't have to destroy the people who wronged you. You just have to let the truth do the work.